The ancient crystal spires of Veltar stretched toward the dying stars like desperate fingers clawing at hope itself. Deep within the central temple, High Priest Kolven felt the weight of an entire civilization pressing down on his crystalline shoulders. His forearms trembled as he traced the forbidden symbols in the air, each gesture pulling cosmic energy from the very fabric of space. The stellar plague had already devoured the Morketh system 3 cycles ago. Entire worlds had simply stopped existing, consumed by the expanding wave of destructive energy that turned matter itself into nothingness. The Keflar colonies had lasted only days once the plague reached them. Now it was coming for Veltar, and every simulation showed the same result: total annihilation within 7 cycles. High Priest, the energy readings are fluctuating, called out Tech Acolyte Rendar from his position at the crystal monitoring arrays. His young voice carried barely controlled panic. Around the vast ritual chamber, dozens of Veltai priests and technicians worked frantically, their translucent forms flickering with nervous energy. Elder Mordin drifted closer to the central platform, his ancient body more spirit than substance after centuries of life. The calculations must be perfect. Kolven. The forbidden texts are clear. The guardians of the void respond only to precise dimensional coordinates. One mistake, and we could tear open rift to places that should never be disturbed. Kolven nodded grimly, sweat-like condensation forming on his crystal skin. The ancient texts had been buried in the deepest vaults for good reason. They spoke of beings from beyond the known galaxy, entities so powerful they could manipulate stars like children playing with glowing orbs. The texts called them the Guardians of the Void, mysterious protectors who appeared in times of cosmic crisis to restore balance to the universe. Initiating primary resonance sequence, Kolven announced, his forearms beginning the complex weaving pattern passed down through generations of forbidden knowledge. The air itself began to shimmer as dimensional energy gathered around the summoning circle carved into the temple floor. The other priests stepped back as bolts of pure energy crackled between Kolven's fingers. The massive crystal formations throughout the chamber began to sing, a deep, haunting melody that resonated through every Veltai's soul present. This was power beyond their normal understanding, forces that their peaceful civilization had never dared to touch. Energy cascade at 60%, reported Rendau, his voice tight with concentration. Dimensional barriers are thinning according to the ancient formulas. Mordin floated to the edge of the ritual circle, studying the readouts with growing unease. Something felt wrong. The energy patterns were shifting in ways the text didn't describe. But what choice did they have? The stellar plague would reach Veltar in days, not weeks. Every hour of delay meant millions more of their people would die screaming as reality itself dissolved around them. Continuing to 80%, Kolven declared, his arms moving faster now, weaving increasingly complex patterns. The forbidden symbols blazed with cold fire in the air around him. Ancient warnings echoed in his mind. Warnings about the dangers of contacting beings from the dark spaces between galaxies, about summoning entities that might view lesser species as insignificant insects. The crystal spires throughout the city began to resonate in harmony, their song growing louder and more desperate. Every Veltai on the planet could feel it now, the pulling sensation as their high priest reached across impossible distances to call for salvation. High Priest. Rendar's voice cracked with alarm. The coordinates are shifting. The dimensional anchor points are not where the text indicated. Kolven's eyes widened in horror, but it was too late to stop. The ritual had reached the point of no return. Energy cascaded through the chamber like a living thing, and the summoning circle erupted in blinding white light that hurt to look at directly. Instead of the gentle, ethereal opening the text described, space-time tore open like fabric ripped by giant claws. The portal that formed was not the elegant doorway they expected, but a jagged wound in reality itself. Through it, energy signatures poured out, not the subtle emanations of cosmic guardians, but raw, powerful transmissions that their instruments could barely process. Far away, near a small yellow star in an unremarkable spiral arm of the galaxy, automated monitoring stations suddenly blazed to life. Deep space sensor arrays designed to detect the faintest whispers of alien communication locked onto the massive energy burst that had just torn through multiple dimensions. Emergency protocols activated across a dozen space stations as the most powerful first contact signal in recorded history lit up their displays. By the ancestors, Mordin gasped as readings flooded their senses. The coordinates were catastrophically wrong. Instead of reaching into the peaceful realms where benevolent guardians dwelt, they had punched through dimensional barriers near something else entirely. Something that lived on a world so dangerous the instruments couldn't even classify the threat levels. The summoning circle continued to burn with impossible energy as alarms wailed throughout the temple. They had wanted to call forth mythical protectors. Instead, they had just sent a distress beacon to beings their ancient text described in the darkest warnings, the dreaded Deathworlders who made their homes in the most lethal corners of the galaxy. And somewhere in the growing energy storm, sensors detected movement. Something was coming. The UES Pathfinder dropped out of hyperspace with a smooth efficiency that marked all Earth fleet vessels. Captain Tom Bradley felt a familiar slight tremor as the ship's quantum drive cycled down from faster-than-light travel. Around him, the bridge crew immediately began their post-jump procedures, but something was clearly wrong with the readings they were getting. "Captain, we've got a problem," called out Lieutenant Kate Morrison from the communication station. Her fingers danced across the holographic displays as she tried to make sense of the data flooding in. "I'm reading massive radiation levels throughout this entire system. Background radiation is off the charts. This whole place should be a dead zone." Tom studied the main view screen as the ship's sensors painted a detailed picture of the system ahead. 3 planets orbited a dying red giant star, and all of them were being bombarded with radiation that would cook most known life forms in minutes. But there, on the second planet, were unmistakable signs of civilization, towering crystal structures that gleamed like jewels against the harsh stellar light. "Not for us," Tom replied with the casual confidence of someone who had grown up in a world where acid rain was considered a minor weather inconvenience. "Looks like we've got first contact, people, and they're in trouble." The Pathfinder was a Ranger-class exploration vessel designed for exactly this kind of situation. Her crew of 200 had been selected for their ability to handle the unexpected, and first contact protocols was something they had drilled countless times. But as they approached the inner system, even veteran spacers began to whistle in amazement at the readings. "So, these radiation levels would kill an unprotected human in about 6 hours," reported Chief Science Officer Dr. Helen Barnes from her station. "For most species we've encountered, we're talking minutes or seconds of exposure." "And yet someone built those cities," Tom observed, watching as their long-range sensors revealed more details about the crystalline civilization below. "Navigation, take us in nice and easy. I don't want to spook anyone. Communications, see if you can establish contact." Lieutenant Morrison began broadcasting standard first contact greetings in multiple languages and mathematical sequences. Broadcasting on all frequencies. "Captain, if there's anyone down there with working receivers, they'll hear us." Meanwhile, on the surface of Veltar, the arrival of a human ship had triggered panic throughout the crystal spires. Elder Mordin floated in the central observation chamber, his ancient form trembling as he watched the alien vessel approach through their radiation-shielded sensors. "Impossible," whispered Tech Acolyte Rendau, his young voice filled with disbelief. "Their ship is operating in open space with no radiation shielding. None that our instruments can detect anyway." High Priest Colven materialized beside them, still exhausted from the failed summoning ritual. "Show me their vessel's composition readings." The holographic display that appeared made every Veltai in the chamber recoil in horror. The approaching ship was built from metals that would become molten slag in their system's radiation field. Its hull temperature reading showed it was operating in conditions that would melt most Veltai technology, yet it flew as smoothly as if it were cruising through empty space. "By the ancestors," Mordin gasped, "they are not using energy shields. They are not using any protection at all. They are simply immune to the radiation that kills us." As they watched, smaller craft began launching from the human vessel. Shuttle-sized ships that moved with predatory grace, scanning the system with sensors that cut through the radiation storm like it didn't exist. The pilot's casual maneuvering through plasma storms that would destroy Veltai ships suggested these beings considered the hostile environment barely worth noticing. "The ancient texts," Colven whispered, his crystalline features pale with growing understanding. "The warnings about Deathworlders, beings who evolve on worlds so dangerous that nothing else can survive there. We've summoned the very creatures our ancestors feared most." The legend spoke of species that made their homes in the hearts of dying stars, that bred in the crushing depths of gas giants, that found deadly radiation as comfortable as a warm breeze. The Veltai had always assumed such stories were misdesigned to frighten younglings. On the Pathfinder, Tom Bradley was studying preliminary scan results with growing concern. "Dr. Barnes, what's the situation down there? Are we looking at a natural disaster or something artificial?" "Both, sir," Helen replied grimly. "There's some kind of expanding energy phenomenon consuming nearby star systems. Based on the residual signatures, it completely destroys matter at the quantum level, and it's heading straight for that inhabited planet." "How long do they have?" "At current expansion rate, maybe a week, sir. Probably less." Tom nodded decisively. "Kate, boost signal strength and transmit on emergency frequencies. If we're their only hope, we need to make contact fast." Lieutenant Morrison's enhanced transmission cut through the radiation interference like a blade through cloth. Throughout the Veltai cities, communication arrays that had been struggling with the system's hostile environment suddenly received a crystal-clear signal. "This is a United Oath ship Pathfinder." Tom's voice echoed through the crystal chambers of Veltar with startling clarity. "We receive your distress signal. We can see you're facing some kind of expanding destruction phenomenon. How can we help?" The simple, direct offer of assistance from beings who casually flew through radiation that would kill every Veltai on the planet sent shockwaves through their civilization. Here were the Deathworlders of legend, offering aid instead of conquest. Elder Mordin looked at his fellow council members with something approaching hope for the first time since the stellar plague had begun its march toward their home. Perhaps their desperate summoning had worked after all. The fabric of space-time rippled like disturbed water as 400 human warships materialized in perfect formation around Veltar. Admiral Mike Webb's 7th Fleet emerged from hyperspace with the precision of a well-rehearsed dance, each vessel taking its assigned position in a three-dimensional grid that stretched across the entire system. From the bridge of his flagship, the massive carrier UES Defiance, Admiral Webb watched as his fleet deployed with military efficiency. Battleships the size of small cities took up defensive positions around the outer system. Cruisers and destroyers formed protective screens around the more vulnerable support vessels. And everywhere, swarms of fighters and scout ships moved like schools of metallic fish through the radiation-soaked void. "Admiral," reported Commander Lisa Hayes from the tactical station, her voice carrying just a hint of amusement. "I'm reading massive electromagnetic spikes from the planet's surface. The locals seem agitated by our presence." Webb studied the holographic displays showing Veltai communication networks lighting up like Christmas trees. Every crystal spire on the planet was broadcasting emergency signals, and their primitive sensors were burning out from trying to catalog the human fleet's massive energy signatures. "Understandable," Webb replied, watching as engineering ships immediately began deploying atmospheric processes toward the plague-infected zones. 400 warships probably look like an invasion force to them. Have all ship captains reduce power output to minimum operational levels. No point in frying their equipment before we can help them. But even at reduced power, the human vessels operated with casual efficiency in conditions that the Veltai found absolutely terrifying. Heavy construction ships moved through radiation storms that would melt Veltai hulls, their crews working in environments where background radiation readings broke every scale the aliens possessed. On Veltar's surface, the High Council had convened in the deepest, most heavily shielded chamber they could find. Through their viewing crystals, they watched a display of technological might that defied every law of physics they understood. "Count them again," Elder Mordin commanded, his translucent form flickering with barely controlled panic. Tech acolyte Rendar's voice cracked as he read the scanner results. 400 major vessels, Elder, plus approximately 2,000 smaller craft deployed in support roles. Total crew complement. He paused, double-checking the impossible numbers. 2.8 million beings. The chamber fell silent except for the humming of their radiation shields, which were operating at maximum power just to keep the council members alive in their own meeting room. Outside, through the crystal walls, they could see human ships moving with predatory grace through radiation fields that would cook a Veltai in seconds. "Look at their construction vessels," whispered High Priest Colvan, pointing at the tactical display. "They're deploying machinery directly into the plague zones. No shields, no protection barriers. They are working in open space where our instruments cannot even function." As they watched in horrified fascination, human engineering teams began establishing what appeared to be forward operating bases in the most radiation-soaked regions of the system. Massive prefabricated structures unfolded like metal flowers, and within hours, fully operational facilities were processing the deadly energy that comprised the stellar plague. The radiation reading from those work sites, Rendar reported with disbelief, are measuring at levels that would kill a Veltai instantly, yet their workers are moving around without any protection we can detect. Commander Hayes stood at her post aboard the Defiance, coordinating the fleet's humanitarian response with the same efficiency her people had once used to fight wars. Engineering teams Alpha through Delta are establishing containment barriers around the plague's leading edge, she reported to Admiral Webb. Medical ships are standing by to assist with civilian evacuations if needed. What about the locals' radiation sensitivity? Webb asked, studying report from the advanced scout teams. Extreme, sir. Dr. Parker estimates that normal background radiation in this system would be lethal to them within minutes. They are operating from heavily shielded underground facilities. Webb nodded thoughtfully. Deploy the heavy atmospheric processors. If we're going to help these people, we need to create safe zones they can actually survive in. Back in the Veltai Council chamber, Elder Mordin floated closer to the viewing crystal, his ancient features twisted with growing realization. The ancient texts were true, he whispered. We called forth beings who make their homes in the darkest, most dangerous corners of existence. The legends had spoken of Deathworlders, species that evolved on planets so hostile that they considered galaxy-ending disasters to be minor inconveniences. Beings who could survive in the hearts of dying stars, who bred in the crushing depths of gas giants, who found deadly radiation as comfortable as a gentle breeze. Watch their fighters. Colvan pointed at the tactical display where human combat aircraft were performing patrol sweeps through the system. They are flying formation patterns through plasma storm that would destroy our fastest ships. The human pilots were indeed treating the hostile environment with casual indifference, their sleek fighters dancing between radiation bursts that registered on Veltai sensors as weapons-grade energy discharges. To the aliens, it looked like watching someone stroll casually through a battlefield while artillery shells exploded harmlessly around them. Admiral, Commander Hayes reported, we're getting more detailed scans of the stellar plague phenomenon. It's definitely artificial in origin, some kind of self-replicating quantum weapon. Nasty piece of work. How long until it reaches the inhabited planet? Webb asked. 4 days, sir. Maybe 5 if we're lucky. Webb studied the tactical display, watching as his fleet's massive industrial capacity swung into action. Signal all engineering ships. Full deployment of countermeasures. If someone built this thing, we can unbuild it. The Veltai watched in stunned silence as humanity's finest began treating their extinction-level crisis as just another engineering problem to solve. They had summoned Deathworlders indeed, but perhaps, for the first time in their history, that might actually be exactly what they needed. The crystal command bunkers of Veltar shook with desperate energy as Defense Coordinator Velcran activated the most powerful weapons their civilization had ever created. The Veltai Defense Consortium had spent centuries perfecting these stellar disruptors, massive energy cannons capable of cracking moons and boiling away planetary atmospheres. All batteries. Concentrate fire on the largest vessels, Velcran commanded through the emergency networks. If these Deathworlders have come to conquer us, we will not die quietly. Across 3 continents, hidden weapon emplacements emerged from beneath crystal mountains. The stellar disruptors charged with the power of captured starlight, each one channeling enough energy to devastate a small fleet. When they fired, the combined assault lit up the system like a miniature supernova. The energy beam struck Admiral Webb's flagship with the fury of dying stars. For a moment, every Veltai holding their breath thought they might have actually damaged a massive human vessel. Then the tactical displays updated, and their hopes crumbled to dust. Captain Jack Thompson barely looked up from his coffee as his frigate UES Steadfast registered the incoming fire. Helm, shields holding at what percentage? 9 to 7%, sir, reported his tactical officer with casual indifference. Should I return fire? Negative. They are scared and probably think we're invaders. Jack set down his mug and studied the sensor readings of a massive solar flare building on the system's dying star. Actually, we've got a bigger problem. Navigation. Plot intercept course for that plasma discharge. Those crystal cities won't survive a direct hit. The UES steadfast accelerated toward the solar flare with the easy confidence of a ship designed to operate in environments that would melt most alien technology. Behind her, the rest of the Seventh Fleet continued their humanitarian operations as if the most powerful weapons in Veltai space hadn't even scratched their paint. "Captain," his science officer called out, "that solar flare is carrying enough charged particles to sterilize 3 of their colony worlds. Impact in 4 to 7 minutes. Jack nodded and activated the ship's gravitational manipulation systems. Just a little course correction needed. "Helm, take us right into the plasma stream." The Veltai watched in absolute terror as the human frigate flew directly into a solar phenomenon that registered on their instruments as a civilization-ending disaster. Through their radiation-shielded sensors, they saw the small human vessel position itself in the path of destruction like a man stepping in front of a freight train. Then something impossible happened. The solar flare simply changed direction. "Plasma streams heading safely into deep space now," Jack reported to Admiral Webb with the same tone he might use to mention the weather. "No harm to local populations." In the Veltai command bunkers, silence stretched for long moments as Defense Coordinator Velcran stared at readings that defied every law of physics he understood. A single human ship had just casually redirected a stellar-scale phenomenon that would have killed billions of his people. Meanwhile, Chief Engineer Ben Carter was having the time of his life working directly in the path of the stellar plague. His engineering teams had deployed massive containment barriers right at the phenomenon's leading edge, and their equipment was functioning perfectly in conditions that would instantly destroy any Veltai technology. Environmental suits reporting radiation levels as elevated but manageable, Ben announced over the comm system, his voice cheerful despite working in what the Veltai considered the most dangerous location in the galaxy. Beginning systematic neutralization of the quantum disruption field. His teams moved through the plague zone with practiced efficiency, deploying specialized equipment that began breaking down the artificial phenomenon at the molecular level. Robotic drones swarmed around the work sites, their mechanical forms shrugging off radiation that would cook organic tissue in seconds. "Ben, this is Medical Officer Helen Jong aboard the Mercy," came a voice over the communication channel. "How are your people holding up out there?" "Great. Document Charlie team reports their radiation badges are still in the green zone. This stuff isn't much worse than working near a reactor core back home." Back on Admiral Webb's flagship, Dr. Jong was studying the preliminary medical scans of the Veltai with growing amazement. "Admiral, the local physiology can't handle even basic stellar background radiation. What's normal space to us is instantly lethal to them. They're essentially living in the equivalent of deep underground bunkers just to survive in their own solar system." Webb nodded thoughtfully as he watched his fleet systematically dismantle a threat that had terrorized an entire species. "Makes sense why they were so panicked by our arrival. We probably look like beings from their worst nightmares." The demonstration of human capability continued for hours. Engineering ships casually rebuilt damaged sections of Veltai cities, using materials that remained stable in the high-radiation environment. Medical vessels established treatment centers in areas the aliens couldn't even approach. And everywhere, human personnel work with a kind of casual competence that comes from a species that considers hostile environments to be just another day at the office. In the depths of Veltar's most secure command center, Elder Mordin floated before the tactical displays showing humans literally wrestling with cosmic forces. Teams of engineers were treating their extinction-level crisis as merely an interesting technical challenge, solving in hours what Veltai science couldn't address in centuries. "The ancient warning spoke truly," he whispered to the assembled High Council. "We have indeed summoned Deathworlders, beings who make their homes where nothing else can survive." High Priest Colvan watched human combat engineers establish safe zones in radiation fields that broke Veltai measurement equipment. "But perhaps," he said quietly, "we summoned exactly what we needed." For the first time since the stellar plague had begun its march toward their homeworld, the Veltai dared to hope that survival might actually be possible. The crystal gardens of Veltar had never been more beautiful. Where once barren rock had stretched beneath the harsh radiation of their dying star, now lush vegetation swayed in the gentle artificial breeze created by human atmospheric processes. The air itself sparkled with tiny particles of filtered starlight, safe now for Veltai to breathe without the heavy radiation suits that had been their prison for generations. Ambassador Rachel Davis walked through the transformed landscape with quiet satisfaction, her environmental suit's reading showing radiation levels that would have been considered a pleasant spring day back on Earth. Around her, Veltai children played in the open air for the first time in their species' history, their crystalline forms glittering with joy as they experienced true sunlight without fear. "It's remarkable what your people accomplished here," High Priest Colvan said as he approached the human delegation. His translucent body now glowed with vibrant health, the sickly flicker of radiation poisoning replaced by the strong, steady light that marked a thriving Veltai. 6 months ago, we were facing extinction. Now our world is more habitable than it has been in 1,000 years. Rachel smiled, watching as human engineering crews worked alongside Veltai technicians to install the final atmospheric regulation stations. The collaboration had been awkward at first. The Veltai were terrified of working in conditions a new human friend considered barely elevated above normal, while the humans had to constantly remind themselves that their casual movements through radiation fields that could kill their allies in seconds. "The United Earth Fleet doesn't conquer," Rachel explained to the assembled High Council members who had gathered for the formal establishment of diplomatic relations. "We explore, we protect, we build. If something's trying to kill you, we either make friends with it or make it useful." The stellar plague had indeed been made useful. Human scientists had reverse-engineered the quantum disruption technology and converted it into a powerful terraforming tool. What had once been a weapon of mass destruction now served to safely disperse harmful radiation and create stable atmospheric conditions on previously uninhabitable worlds. Elder Mordin floated closer to the group, his ancient form stronger than it had been in centuries. "When we performed the summoning ritual, we believed we were calling forth mythical guardian from beyond the stars. We thought we would see beings of pure energy who could manipulate reality with their thoughts. Instead, you got engineers with really good equipment," laughed Captain Rick Porter, commander of the Human Engineering Corps. His teams had spent months working in the most dangerous environments the Veltai had ever imagined, treating each impossible challenge as just another interesting problem to solve. The transformation of Veltai had been nothing short of miraculous to witness. Human construction robots had rebuilt entire cities using materials that could withstand the system's harsh radiation environment. Medical teams had established treatment centers where Veltai suffering from generations of radiation exposure could finally receive proper care. And throughout it all, the humans had worked with a kind of cheerful competence that made the impossible seem routine. "We summoned you in desperation, believing you were something to be feared," Colvan continued, his voice carrying a mix of wonder and gratitude. "The ancient text spoke of Deathworlders as creatures to avoid at all costs. Now we understand. You are indeed guardians, just not the mythical kind we expected." Admiral Webb materialized nearby, having just returned from inspecting the new orbital defense platforms his fleet had constructed around Veltar. The massive space station served a dual purpose, protecting the planet from future threats while also acting as research facilities where human and Veltai scientists could work together in controlled environments. "The universe is dangerous enough without us fighting each other," Webb said with genuine warmth. "When someone calls for help, we answer. That's what neighbors do." The establishment of Earth's first diplomatic embassy in the Andromeda Spiral Arm had been a cause for celebration throughout human space. The elegant crystal structure that served as the embassy building was a marvel of combined human engineering and Veltai artistry, standing as a symbol of what two very different species could accomplish when they worked together. Trade had begun almost immediately. The Veltai possessed knowledge of exotic energy manipulation that fascinated human scientists, while human technology opened up possibilities the crystal-based civilization had never dreamed of. Merchant vessels now regularly travel between Earth space and Veltar, carrying not just goods but ideas, art, and friendship. That day, as the formal ceremonies concluded, the Veltai High Council performed one final ritual. In the deepest archives of their civilization, they updated the ancient texts that had guided their people for millennia. Where once stood warnings about the dangers of contacting Deathworlders, they inscribed new wisdom for future generations. When cosmic forces threaten existence itself, the new passages read, "Call upon the humans. They who make homes among the stars will make the darkness safe. They are the guardians we never expected, not beings of myth and legend, but ordinary people who do extraordinary things because it needs to be done." The human fleet maintained a permanent presence in the sector, their ships coming and going with a steady rhythm of a civilization at peace. Children on both worlds grew up learning each other's languages, and it was not uncommon to see young Veltai working alongside human engineers, their natural energy manipulation abilities perfectly complementing human technology. As the twin sun set over the crystal gardens of Veltar, painting the sky in shades of gold and silver, the Veltai finally understood the truth their desperate summoning had revealed. Sometimes the most terrifying beings in the universe, those who walk casually through radiation that would kill you, who treat stellar disasters as minor inconveniences, who make their homes in the darkest corners of space, make the very best protectors. The Deathworlders had come, just as the ancient texts had warned. But they had come as friends. Asterisk the END asterisk.